Hey, everybody. It is Sunday, the 10th of April. This is Medusa Was Framed, and my name is Joyce. And today I'm going to talk about another wacky, wonderful, mysterious, spooky ruin here in the always fabulous St. Augustine, Florida. This is a place not too far from my house that I have driven past going to get on the freeway or to visit folks that live over on that part of town. This sits on State Road 16, north of Old City. This actual place is probably, depending on traffic, like 6 minutes, less than 10 minutes from my house. This photo, I think, was taken a decade or so or more ago, maybe more than 2 decades ago, because it doesn't look like this now. I didn't take this photo. I stole this one from the internet because it's a really good overall shot. You'll see from the photos that I took myself that it has become entirely overgrown. Anyway, it took a lot of research to find out what this was. No one seems to know. My first inclination was to ask people who have lived here for some time, lived here for 10 years or more, or people that were born here. And no one knows what this was originally. Even locals don't know what this was originally. What I heard from people who have been here between 15 and 20 years is, to their recollection, it was a kind of craft fair swap meet type of thing. And that's what they remember. But obviously, something that looks like this was not built to be a craft fair or a swap meet. So again, whenever you go down a rabbit hole or start researching for yourself, you find more than you bargained for. Sometimes you find fascinatingly morbid things. I like the way that things went the last video I made, where I just turned on the slideshow while I was talking and then came back to the slides one by one and explained them. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to put this on slideshow and then just start talking to you about the history of this place. So what I learned digging and digging and digging is that this attraction was called the oldest jail. It was built in the late 50s. I can't find a definitive date, but it was built by a gentleman by the name of L.H. Buddy Ho, H-O-U-G-H. I don't know if that's Ho or How. I'm going to say Ho. Built it in the late 50s, closed it in 65. It had a 1/6 accuracy running model train on the property during its operation. And apparently, if you are brave enough to walk back through all of that, which I would not consider, you can still find the tracks and the trestles way back there. I can tell you that in my poking around, there are not any obvious ways to get in, but if you really, really, really poke around, you'll find some broken places to get in. And you can tell by looking in that this is quite a camp for a variety of folks. They have, this is just from looking in the front gate. They have marked their property very, very clearly, not their property, their space, their camp, very, very clearly. So I would not consider walking in there farting around. There's no need. Anyway, during its operation, it had the old cast iron lanterns from the original Bridge of Lions, which is the famous bridge that links St. Augustine with the peninsula across the Matanzas River known as Anastasia Island, which is where the famous crocodile, not crocodile, I'm sorry, gator farm is. And it also linked with after Flagler supposedly did all his things here and people started wanting to come to Florida because it was the Riviera of the South. We had a housing boom and it connected people with a more effective bridge than we had at the time. The Florida Department of Transportation replaced the original cast iron lanterns with aluminum lanterns, and Mr. Ho was able to purchase those and he had those there. So that was a historical note. It closed in 1965. And then it became what people remember it being, and that was Wolf's Den Indian Crafts. So a swap meet of sorts. Now, as I said, sometimes when you're going down a rabbit hole, you find all kinds of interesting things, and some of them are morbid. Now, we also have an attraction here, and all this stuff is close to my house, called the Old Jail. And it is a total Tartarian building that we are supposed to believe was built to be a jail. And what's kind of funny is the guy that owned the attraction called the Old Jail, which used to be a jail, had to change the name of his attraction. Even though it was the Old Jail, he had to change the name of his attraction because Ho had the name Oldest Jail. So when they were both operating as attractions at the same time, even though the actual Old Jail was the Old Jail, it had to change its name. In 65, when the Oldest Jail attraction closed, then the owner of the Old Jail attraction could go back to the name of the Old Jail, and that is what it's called today, a couple blocks from my house. That man was Henry McDaniel. He's the person that purchased the building that was the Old Jail and turned it into an attraction. Okay, so what's kind of freaky and spooky about all this, as if the pictures that you're looking at aren't spooky enough, is that Buddy Howe, the man who purchased this that you're looking at and, well, built it and turned it into an attraction, had another morbid museum. And that was called the Tragedy in U.S. History Museum. So this guy had two attractions in St. Augustine. One was an old jail, and the other one was Tragedy in U.S. History. And yes, he had Bonnie and Clyde's getaway car with all 137 bullet holes. There is a snap. Oops. He had James Manfield's death car. This is so funny. He had all this stuff. This guy owned this tragedy museum and the Old Jail attraction. What a morbid dude. What's even more morbid is Mr. Howe and his wife lived in the house on the property of the Tragedy in US Museum. So he had Jane Mansfield's death car. He had Oswald's bedroom furniture. He had the stretcher that Oswald was supposed to be carried off in when he got shot. He had a bloody leather jacket that belonged to James Dean. He had the limousine that Kennedy rode in before the infamous Continental that he died in, all this stuff. And they lived in this building. They lived there. Ooh. Oh my God. It's kind of funny. He purchased the property, which again, this house still stands. You're going to die when you find out what it is now. But this house still stands, and it's in a mixed use area. It's in an area where there are homes, but there are also attractions. He purchased it in '65 and made it very clear that he was going to turn it into this peculiar museum. And the city council had one of those emergency meetings with no notice type of deal, where they took museum out of the language for what would be allowed in the zoning for permits of this area. So he had purchased his house, but his permit to open his museum, and there's an old photo of it there, was denied. Well, he took it all the way to the Florida Supreme Court and he won. So he was able to open his museum. Oh my gosh. So Mr. Ho died in 1996, and a year or two after that, apparently his wife just kind of gave up on trying to keep it a museum, although she continued to live there. But the museum itself closed about that time. Now I'm just waiting for the slideshow to start over. Okay, so we're going to start from the beginning now. I have more things to tell you in detail, but I'm going to start from the beginning. So this was a photo that I found online at a website that deals with old attractions nationwide that have gone by the wayside. Fascinating. That's what you see when you drive on State Road 16. That's what you see on the, let me think for a second. That is the north side of State Road 16. If you were heading west to get on the I-95, that's what you see. Now this picture I took, oh, I have to stop it. This picture I took just walking around just the other day. Everything is really torn up. As you can see, a lot of overgrowth. So it looks very different now from the photo before. You see, looks very different than that does. So very, very overgrown. And I took this as well. It was a beautiful day, you see, but it had rained the day before, and this was all slush, slush, slush. So I was slurping along in the lovely Florida sun. There were lots of bees and dragonflies to greet me. So, you know, here's the edge, and that being the gate, right? It would have had the drawbridge there. There's an area here you'll see a better picture of, but it would appear that they had animals in there or something. I can't figure it out. I mean, the first time that I saw it from the road, I thought, gosh, what was this? And they had some kind of animal attraction in here. But I don't know. I wonder if they had people dressed in prison attire at some point. I don't know. It's strange. They have this really cool old well, and it's actually right next to this well, to the left of this well. Of course, you know, this is all made up. That's where one of the broken entrances is, where you can see in to the property. And this is looking, oops, I'm sorry. This is looking in that busted opening that's right to the left of the well. See, there's a board that has fallen here. And whatever that was, everything's just overgrown. And here we're looking into, I would imagine, this is looking through that same opening that's to the left of the well. I would imagine by this cover that this was where the crafts fair was. I mean, it could have been on the ground in tents too. There's really very little to learn about this place. But certainly this schmaltz right here was not part of an original jail show. Now this is the enclosed area that I was talking about, and there's, you know, State Road 16 right there, and the new, I think that's a Marriott over there. But see, it's like there was animals or something in here. And I guess this would have been built after the jail attraction. I can't imagine they would have animals and stuff during the jail attraction. But when it was the Wolf's Den Indian Fair, maybe they had a garden in there and they grew vegetables that they sold, or herbs. I don't know. There's nothing really written about this. This is standing again on State Road 16 looking. There's this great, wonderful piece of coquina here, and you can't really tell it. Maybe you can. You can tell. There used to be a plaque here that identified it. If you were actually looking at it, you could see the plaque. Now, right behind this big bush, you see is that enclosure. And this is another entrance. On both sides are, I don't know what these are called, but you know, those big stanchion support things that used to hold power cables down in the old days. You know, if you're an old fart like me, then you remember when power cables were held down with these big support things. I don't know what they're called. Showing my age. There's a better look at it, and there's one of these on the other side. But there's that other entrance. Just a couple weeks ago, someone had busted a big hole through this, and you could have walked right in. I was thinking, oh, I should go in, but I didn't. But it's okay. I mean, I can get in. There are two places where you can get in if you nose around a little bit, but I wouldn't walk in there for the reasons I said. The homeless people that live there have made their demarcations of their places very clear. It would appear that this isn't, you know, not a real gallows, but set up to be a gallows. And of course, well, that's a power pole, that doesn't count, but that's part of that gallows that I showed you there. And that being what is left of what was supposed to be, you know, the actual old jail, whatever. That's just a close-up of that entrance. And this is, whoops. So, oh, okay. So you see this piece of wood right here. See? So I walked up to that piece of wood and I peeped in through it, and that's what you see behind it. Everything is just completely overgrown. And there's the gallows, which of course wasn't a real gallows. Now this is another entrance that actually, if you weren't out of your car and walking, you wouldn't even know that this was part of the building anymore. It's really overgrown. In fact, I was surprised. I didn't realize it went this far from your car. You know, you're going too fast and you don't see it. This is walking right up to that entrance and looking up kind of how it's cool, you know, for me to see how things decay. The archaeologist in me loves decay and watching how things fall apart. This is a shot. I'm standing up on the, let's see, the western side of the wall, and I'm looking into the old enclosure. And so what you're looking at here is that building that I had shown you before that had the little, what do you call that thing? The little covered canopy area here. That's just looking in at that. And this is just another shot from the same wall, the western wall, looking at the back of the entrance. This is the most interesting entrance, you know, the old drop bridge there. Where I was standing in the two pictures prior was just around the corner from there. And this is that old other power line support thing. People that are over 50 will know what I'm talking about. So if you were to walk around this wall and then go to the left, that's where I was standing over there when I took those pictures of the inside. That's kind of a weird photo of, I don't know, some kind of cannon, but look how it's all flipped. It was right around here. Can you see how there's a rise there? I had to walk in mud past my ankles to get up there. But that's where I stood and took those pictures on the inside. Now, if I were to keep walking east, you come to this entrance, and I showed another picture of that earlier. It's very open back here, but I still wouldn't walk back there. You can see in there, and there's ruined buildings way in the back of the property that you can see. And of course, I love ruins, but I'm not going to walk back there. That's somebody else's house right now. Okay, so I couldn't find any information about what they charged for admission to this place. But, you know, I don't know. 50s, 60s, what would it have been? 50 cents? I don't know. World was a different place. Anyway, I think it's fascinating that there's this huge place that obviously cost a few dollars to build in the 50s, and no one who is local to this area or has been here 20 years or so even remembers what it was. But anyway, the address is 2080 State Road 16, St. Augustine, Florida. So if you want, you can probably put that into Google Earth and get a visual. And I was just going to do a really quick video about that alone. But when I found out about this other stuff, I just could not believe it. So Mr. Howe also had the Tragedy in U.S. History Museum. And this locale, which is still standing, I could probably walk there in 3 minutes from my house, sits at, where did I write it down? 7 Williams Street. It's kind of funny too, if you think about it. St. Augustine was the city that had the first Ripley's Believe It or Not museum. We have all these other strange museums like Museum of Torture, but the Ripley's Museum opened in, gosh, I think 42 or 43, in what was the summer home of Mr., I think it was called Mr. Warden, one of Flagler's Standard Oil cronies. I did a video that included information about that place. I don't for one second believe that they built it. It's completely Moorish, and it's right next to the Castillo San Marcos, and there's no way that, yeah, no. Anyway, so the city the city council that allowed the first creepy, freaky Ripley's Believe It or Not with morbid things inside did not want the tragedy in U.S. History Museum, and did that whole emergency midnight council meeting to deny his permit. Emergency ordinance in 1965, but he won. He got to open it anyway. These are some of the things that are supposed to be, that were in there. It says President Kennedy's car, but it wasn't the death car. What I found indicated that it was the limousine that he rode before he was in the Death Continental. So I guess, well, I don't know. Would that have been a DC limo? I don't know. Lee Harvey Oswald's car and the ambulance he died in. His Dallas furniture, yeah. The Zapruder film, Bonnie and Clyde's getaway car, Jane Mansfield's death car, the whistle from the old 97, I don't know what that is. The old Spanish jail built in 1718, human skeletons inside, antique torture equipment, bear traps, Flagler tragedy, Elvis Presley's last will and testament, and much more. Interesting about the human skeletons. I was going to get to that when I talked about the actual old jail, but well, I'll come back to that. So this is a picture taken, I don't know when, but the photo indicates by its color and whatnot that it might have been in the 60s, and it's the house. And yeah, just on a side street. That was the place. Obviously, I didn't take that photo, and I don't know if it's still there or not. I kind of doubt it, because I'll tell you in a minute what's in that building now. But yep, Bonnie and Clyde's getaway car was supposed to be in that. This was when the museum was open. That's supposed to be a statue of Oswald with his gun. Yeah, whatever. The Jane Mansfield death car and more of the things that were in there. That's funny. Roadside America. Yeah. Okay. So let's stop here. So the old jail. So you will remember I told you that, oh, you know what? Before I go to that, let me reiterate that Mr. Howe died in 1996. And a year or two after he passed away, his wife found it too hard to manage the museum by herself. There were only, I think I read, less than 10 people coming in a week, and it just wasn't worth the work of it anymore. So she closed the museum, sold off all the artifacts. I have no idea what went where, but continued living in the house. Strange, right? Continue living in the house where all that stuff had been. Well, let me tell you what's there now. In a place that had all these things, it's now the St. Augustine Public Montessori School. Yes, a place that venerated and trivialized all this tragedy is now a school. Isn't that just so predictable? Isn't that just perfect? I mean, do you know how many places in the country there are schools built on top of old cemeteries? I just couldn't get over it. And the way that I found that out is I went to Google Earth and I put the address in. and it pinned the St. Augustine Montessori School. And I was like, no way, no way. I literally got out of my house and walked, it's across the street. And I walked across the street, and sure enough, it's a Montessori school. Too much, too much. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some photos of the real old jail. The real old jail that when the jail itself was closed and the attraction belonged to Mr. McDaniel, even though he owned the actual old jail, which we are supposed to believe you are looking at, that was built to be a jail. That's what you're supposed to believe. He had to change his name. He couldn't call it the old jail because Mr. Howe's attraction was called the oldest jail. So a little history about this place. This was a jail from 1891 till 1953. Obviously, what you're looking at has been cleaned up and refaced and made touristy and pretty. That's pretty much what it looks like today. That also is just minutes from my house. All this weird stuff is in this part of town, which we call Uptown. The old jail, the Fountain of Youth, Our Lady of La Leche and Nombre de Dios and the Great Cross. And now I have found out too, 7 William Street, which was the Tragedy Museum, what would have been the old Hornbeck second fortification wall around St. Augustine, you name it, it's all here. How did I know? I didn't know when I moved in. Okay, so this was the old jail from 1891 to 1953. Story is, Henry Flagler, the shyster, one of those Standard Oil Rockefeller shills, who is supposed to have built everything in St. Augustine that's of note, and supposed to have, built the East Coast Florida Railway, connecting Key West with the Georgia border. Since the jail at the time was right next door to his Ponce de Leon Grand Hotel, he decided that he wanted to build a new jail that was not next door to his Grand Hotel, so his patrons would be safe. So we are to believe that in 1891, he built this and was able to get the jail next to his posh hotel closed. Now, let's just stop right there. Flagler came here in the mid-1800s and decided that it was a glorious place, ripe for building up, full of potential, and he wanted to turn it into the Riviera of the South. So he comes in and he buys all this land that has to be cleared and drained and builds 2 hotels. 2 hotels in a period of 5 years. 2 hotels in the mid-1800s in a period of 5 years. 2 grand hotels with hundreds of rooms, indoor pools, spas, you name it. Why would he do that next to what was the city jail? I ask you. But that's what we're supposed to believe. We're supposed to believe that he built his hotels next to the jail. And that after the hotels had been open for a minute, he realized, oh, gosh, this is really dangerous for my patrons to have the jail next to my hotels. I'm going to make sure that all of this riffraff is far away from my clients who are taking steamships across the ocean to stay in my hotels. So, in what was then a residential neighborhood, all the houses in this neighborhood, well, most of the houses in this neighborhood are from that time. The house that I live in was built in the 1890s. So in this residential neighborhood, he built a jail. And we are to believe that he made it look like a fine home so it wouldn't be an eyesore, because it was going into a residential neighborhood. Does that make any sense to you? Does that make any sense to you? Does this look like a jail to you? Because we're supposed to believe that this is the building that Henry Flagler built as a jail. Not that he bought a house that was already standing and turned it into a jail. No, we are supposed to believe that he built this to make it look like a house when actually it was a jail. And even funnier than that, we're supposed to believe that he hired the man who designed Alcatraz, the prison at Alcatraz, which of course was an old star for it, but don't get me started, P.J. Pauley, to design this. Because Mr. Pauley apparently is really good at building and designing jail facilities in kind of unusual structures. Now, I don't have any pictures of the inside of the jail. I've never been into this attraction. I'm not the least bit interested in going. If I ride my bicycle past or walk past, I can hear and feel and vibe the spirits that are here, and it's not good. The last thing I want to do is go into this place. But if you're interested, there are many, 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 many photos that you can see on the internet. And if you're here and you like such morbid things and you don't find displeasure in hearing angry trapped spirits scream, then this might be something that you want to see. But now this is a side view. This is the front entrance here. This was part of the jail? An old bell tower? Because that's an old bell tower that's been closed up. Look at these Tartarian windows. These Tartarian windows. Yep. Yep. We're supposed to believe all this. I don't have a date on this, but that's a cool old postcard. That certainly dates it, right? That would have been during Flagler time. The jail closed in 1953, and in 1954 was turned into an attraction. Well, this wasn't an image from 1954. I guess these were the people that were waiting to, what, pick up the tenants when they were released, if they were, or taking people who were visiting their family. I don't know. This doesn't make any sense to me. This doesn't make any sense to me. Here's part of the attraction. Yummy, right? Yeah, cool. So now this is a fun photo. You can kind of date it by those beautiful cars. Does this look like a jail to you? In any conceivable way? Does this look like a jail to you? What's interesting is you could still see into the bell tower then. And of course, there would have been a rod for catching plasma for that bell tower that was turned into a flagpole. There are always these contraptions here in St. Augustine. You can still take horse and buggy rides all over the city. All this filigreed ironwork. Yeah, we're supposed to believe that Henry Flagler had this built as a jail. I don't know. What do you think? Oh, we're back here. Let me go back. I'll go to that one and sit at that one for a minute. So back to this jail. Back to this jail that we're supposed to believe that Henry Flagler commissioned Mr. Pauley, who designed Alcatraz, to build this. And there were 4 men in a jail cell. And interestingly enough, much like the stories we hear about Flagler's 2 big hotels, though he had 3, I believe, there was no indoor plumbing in the jail. Henry Flagler spent $1 million in the 1890s to build this big posh, we're to believe, Ponce de Leon hotel without indoor plumbing. No bathrooms in the rooms, because we are supposed to believe that times being what they were, people weren't used to the concept of a bathroom in their room. They were used to going down the hall to a common room in a posh hotel. So he didn't build his hotel with bathrooms. He had to refit that years later on both his hotels, the Alcazar and the Ponce de Leon. We're supposed to believe that. So again, because indoor plumbing was not supposed to have been an expected thing in the 1890s, this place was built without indoor plumbing. So these guys had to go outside for all their business. Indoor plumbing was installed in 1914. Fascinating, right? Fascinating. So this was a jail from 1891 to 1953. And in 1954, it was turned into an attraction. That being Mr. McDaniel. Now, I don't know, but I just gotta say, there is some really morbid stuff that I have been learning about the mentality of this time and the opportunism. And I don't think it was just here in St. Augustine. You know, you dig and you dig and you dig and you find out really horrible things about human behavior. When I was digging around the Fountain of Youth in my last video, I learned about all kinds of corruption, about someone finding an old cross and on the property, and Diamond Lil finding this old cross and declaring that this must be where Ponce de Leon had his first encampment, and that must be the Fountain of Youth. And she opened it up with this tourist ridiculousness in the 30s, and then mysteriously died. And within less than a year of her car accident death, oh gosh, someone else bought the property, another investor. That year, burial grounds were found on the property, and then boom, the Fountain of Youth as an attraction just went to town. Sick. Then we've got the old jail. This was a jail with gallows and horrible stuff. And it's an attraction. And then we've got the oldest jail, which is what we started with. Mr. Howe's thought to build an attraction about a jail. And then a museum of tragedy in America. I'm baffled. I'm fascinated and baffled. But anyway, there's my little ditty for today. You know, it's so cool when you find something that perks your interest, and then you start digging around and you find all kinds of cool, weird stuff. Weird enough that there would be this groovy attraction, I'm sure it was groovy at the time, that was supposed to be a rendition of a colonial time jail. What could possibly be worse than that? What could possibly be worse than that was that the tragedy in U.S. History Museum that had the stretcher that Oswald was carried to the hospital in, and Jane Mansfield's death car, and Bonnie and Clyde's death car full of bullet holes, that place is now a Montessori school. That's even worse than the morbidness of all these jail things. But anyway, I thank you for hanging out with me on this Sunday afternoon. I hope you're having a great weekend. You know, that's gone. That's not even there anymore. That's collapsed, that roof. Yeah, this was quite a while ago. And there you can see that enclosure. Anyway, I'm sorry. Thank you for hanging out with me. I hope you had a good time, and there's more information than you knew that you even wanted to have about the oldest jail, the old jail, and the Museum of American Tragedy. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.